when it came to just making choices and you being like, we're gonna choose differently, Minka. And there were some hard choices, and you would say, the universe rewards you when you do the right thing, or when you are, what is it?
It's when you're in alignment, like when you
When
are
you're in alignment.
aligned choices. Yeah, that's it. I mean,
And
but to manifest, you just need authenticity and alignment.
mhm.
And you,
And it is so true, because I just was like, all right, I'm gonna do what this girl says, and we'll see, because I've got nothing else. I give up. I'm just gonna do everything she says, no matter how hard or how scary. I'm just gonna do it differently, and I'm gonna trust that the universe rewards me for this. And my God, hasn't it?
welcome to Grow with Robin Breckenridge, a podcast about stepping into the most fully expressed, aligned, and conscious version of yourself. Here, we dive into the real work of personal growth, establishing boundaries, understanding your patterns, building self-trust, healing emotional wounds, and creating relationships that feel safe, authentic, and fulfilling. I'm Robin, a life and relationship coach, and in each episode, we'll explore the tools, insights, and conversations that will help you not just improve your life and relationships, but truly transform them. You don't have to just go through it. Let's grow through it, and let's do it together. So welcome back to Grow with Robin. Today, I have a very special guest, someone whose story, vulnerability, and commitment to personal growth has inspired so many. Minka Kelly is an actress, a New York Times best-selling author, and someone who has done some incredible inner work to step into her most authentic self. Her memoir, Tell Me Everything, is an intimate and powerful exploration of her life, the wounds she's worked to heal, and the resilience it takes to grow beyond what we were given. I cannot wait to dive into this conversation today with her. Minka, welcome to my podcast and being the very first guest I have ever had.
What an honor. Thank you so much for that lovely intro and for having me.
My goodness, I'm so excited. I truly could not think of a better guest. And I was saying before we hopped on here, I was like, okay, the last 2 days, I'm like, you should be nervous. Get nervous. It's like your first guest on a podcast. And I was like, I can't be nervous. It's Minka. Like, I just feel so comfortable with you. And so I'm so grateful to have you on.
Aw.
And I guess I'll go a little into our story of how we know each other. So
Okay.
you have done this work with me, and I'm trying to think, it's a few years at this point, right?
Like maybe 4 at this point, I think.
You know, it's so wild when clients come into my life, it just feels
Mhm.
like you've always been there. So I have
Yeah.
a time mark,
Forever?
of course, not forever, but either way, like one of the unique pieces of working with you was that you were writing a memoir about your life and your childhood while we were doing this type of work that I do.
Hmm.
So what was so amazing and different than other clients was you let me read the book before you published it. And I remember you sent it to me on like a drive, and I was flying from California back to Michigan. And I have a little ADD when I read. So like sometimes I have to take
Mm.
breaks or reread things. And I like read for 4.5 hours on my flight,
Mm.
could not put it down. And then I got home, couldn't put it down, read the rest of the book. And, I laughed, I cried, I related. But more than anything, I feel like I am an advocate for my clients' inner children before they are. And when I read that book, I was like, that little girl's getting a first life. So it was just such a beautiful experience to like read an entire book about what you had gone through in your life and how
Mm.
you had turned that around. So what was the experience like writing a memoir about your life while you were doing deep trauma and inner child work?
That's such a great question, and it's so fun to get to talk to you about that, because I've talked about it quite a bit, how I was going through a lot of deep work while writing this, and just sometimes the universe can be magical, because it made this book take a turn that I didn't expect.
Mm.
And it's so funny sometimes how things work out. I know I always wanted to do it. You just never know when sometimes to start something so intimidating and big like that. And the universe sort of just presents you with the time. You just start when you start for whatever the reason is, and you're going through what you're going through at the time. And if you're open and you allow and you let things flow, you are also so open and raw and vulnerable, and you're just letting everything in and letting everything affect you. And while I'm remembering these parts of my past and doing this work mostly with you, while you and I are unpacking and discovering things, I'm simultaneously going, oh, it was this moment that created that fear in me.
Mm.
This is the moment I decided I couldn't trust men. This was the moment I realized or told myself or believed I was unlovable, or that's what did that. And it's not real, and I have to incorporate that kind of trauma or pain or neglect or whatever you want to call it at whatever point in the story will have an effect and inform how you operate in relationships as an adult, be it romantic or platonic.
Mm.
And having you walk with me and hold my hand through that process was everything. I So much of what the book turned into is a lot thanks to you. Absolutely. Absolutely. You helped me have the awareness of these patterns and of these very common reactions to certain types of trauma that I just was like, I have to include this. And it turned into what it turned into, which was so much more um, meaningful than what I initially intended, which is probably why I had so much fear around starting it, because it took me just getting started to know why I was doing it, you know.
So to
So
me, I've worked with so many people and people will ask me all the time, like, oh, that's our special cups too.
yeah,
Uh,
they're special.
well, well, ask me, what is like a common theme that you see working with lots of different people? And the common theme that I see the most is divine timing. And I think
Mm,
that your story is such a great example of divine timing, that like you felt inspired, which I think it was like COVID or around there that you decided to like
yeah.
write this as a screenplay or something, right?
Well, before that, before COVID, it was a screenplay,
Uh,
and I was going to make it into a movie of just like a little mother-daughter story. And then I suddenly had a lot of time, and I had the making of the movie fell through, of course. And then I just had a couple people in my life that I really loved and trusted, that both independent of each other said, I think you should write a book. And I was like, okay, okay. I need help, and so um, my manager at the time got me a book agent, and then my book agent helped me find a creative writing professor to help me take it from screenplay to book and help me learn how to do structure and make sure that I'm telling a story and writing a book that I'd want to read.
so the divine timing part of it for me was like you were on that journey, and then the way that we kind of found each other too, which was random, and you believed in the person who referred you to me, that
Hmm.
we meet at that exact time for you to like be able to have this all written out to deepen the work that you and I are doing, and then deepen the story that you shared with so many people. So maybe we should, for the people who haven't read your book, maybe we should give a little info about what the book is about.
The book is about um, a young girl navigating a lot of chaos around her with a best friend for a mother who struggles with addiction and was a stripper for her whole life, and bounced around and moved around a lot. And, um, there's a lot of really sensitive parts. There's different types of abuse or neglect or manipulate. There's a lot of different themes of having to overcome certain types of circumstances. I don't know. I haven't really pitched the book in a while.
What you're doing great. And
Okay.
I think the part about the book that I loved the most was just how honest you were. Like, even when I
Mm,
was reading it, like for the first time, I just thought, like, wow, what cojones this girl has to share all of these vulnerable things. And I remember you and I having a conversation when you were out, doing all the interviews when the book came out, and just to be able for you to step into your shame and own it and
mm.
transmute that into wisdom and power, and then be able to share that with so many people. Like, I don't know
Well,
if I can do this podcast and not cry the entire podcast.
I mean, I needed my boyfriend with me the whole time to fall into his arms after every interview, and I needed to call you before and after almost every interview to help me with just even language, because I was just so scared, because it is so vulnerable and it's your first time bearing your soul to the whole world. And and I did need a lot of help being that honest. There are quite a few things in there that I took out and put back in a few times, but I ended up keeping it in mostly because of the guidance that I had around me, but also because every writer that I would study across the board, you hear them in an interview and they talk about the importance of being honest and telling the ugliest, most humiliating truth, because that's how you connect. You don't connect to people by making things look pretty. You connect by showing them you're ugly, because we all have so much ugly parts of our own. And when we share that, what you taught me is we're met with empathy, and all shame needs, which was I was carrying so much of, is an empathetic witness, which is one of my favorite things you've taught me. And because, my goodness, isn't it so true? And you helped me practice receive that. You were my first empathetic witness, and then you helped me see how much I was surrounded by that, and it made me brave, and it made me feel like, oh no, these scary parts that I'm sharing are helping me connect to people, which is all I want. And to make other girls that might have the similar situation feel not alone, and to know you don't have to be a victim of your circumstance. You can, you know, make different choices for yourself than maybe your caretakers or parents might have made.
I'm so proud of you. Totally, I'm just
Thanks,
going to say that
Robin.
throughout this podcast. But I think what you're calling the ugly parts, it's just a lie that shame tells us. I think those ugly parts are the human parts. And I know
Mm,
for myself, like, I haven't wrote a book or a memoir, but every day I sit with people, and sometimes I say things that a previous version of me would have said, like, never tell anybody this, like,
yeah,
to the grave. It's the thing that's going to create the most rejection and disconnection in your life. And I remember specifically having one thing that I was like, oh, this thing, no one's ever going to know. Like, I'm truly taking it to the,
right.
and I was sitting in a session with a client in person, and the client literally, like, verbatim said that story, but it was that client's story. And I
Mm,
just looked across the room at her, and I said, I did that too. I
mhm,
watched her. She just started crying, and we were so connected. And I was somebody that she was going, wow, this girl got her stuff together. And, she's looking up to me like I'm someone who's done this work. And for me to say, like, oh, I did that too. And it
mhm,
connected us. And I went, oh my gosh, every single thing that I've gone through that I wanted to hide, those are the things
mhm,
that connect me the most. And honestly, it's one of the reasons I even agreed to do this podcast. I tend to be a little bit more private. I like to do my one-on-one sessions, and it's great. But I thought, just like what you showed with putting all of your life out there. It's like I might be able to connect with more people, and maybe there's
Mm,
a past version of me or you that's listening today that can hear this information, and it can inspire them. So
mm,
thank you for stepping into your shame. I think that is probably the bravest thing anybody can do.
mm.
And
Thank you.
I mean, just the amount of people that have read this book, I think, and can relate to the human parts of you. Because I think sometimes
Mm,
people can look at your life and say, oh, she's beautiful, she's talented, she's successful, and you're human too.
mm. Thanks, Robin.
Yeah, you're so
Yeah.
welcome. So
Thank you for doing the same. Thank you for exerting, like extending yourself with this podcast to reach even more people. I want the whole world to have access to your magic.
thank you. And I'm going to be real honest. It's a stretch for me. Uh,
Yeah.
there's so many. My background is just like, you know, rejection and judgment are
Mm,
really hard for certain parts of me. So thank you for leading the way. And again, for being the first person that comes on this podcast. So I know that I'm not the first like personal growth work that you've done. I know you've done a lot of personal growth work. So is there like a minute in your life that you can look back on where you were like, okay, I have some inner work to do?
I mean, there are so many different parts of my life that would maybe remind me that I have work
Mm,
to do. I mean, the very first time was when my mom was sick.
mm,
And my dad even introduced the idea of therapy to me. My dad was like, you need to get into therapy. And I was like, what? He's like, you need to heal this thing with your mom before she dies, or you'll never forgive yourself. And so that was the first time I started to explore therapy. And then just over the course of my life, every so often there's another thing that goes, oh, you have something else to work on. And, you know, what's so interesting is a lot of, I always talk different types of therapy. All the different types of therapies are all important. And I wish for everyone to have the ability to explore them all. Um, but I'll say, talk therapy is wonderful because it helps you remember and understand and unpack. And I just eventually got myself to a place of what I call awareness hell, because I remember saying, okay, I know all the things, we know all the things, but now what? What do I do with it? I'm still making these choices. I'm still in unhealthy relationships. I'm still going from boyfriend to boyfriend. I'm still having trouble with my girlfriend relationships. I'm still struggling and I can't figure out, and I think everyone else is the problem,
mm,
and I'll never forget the day that you said to me, well, this might be a good time to look at your red flags. I was
mm.
like, oh, well, okay. What do you mean?
I'm sure I said
um,
it lovingly, but yeah.
and of course, no, but it was so loving. It was so loving. It was like, I love you enough to say that, and I wanted peace so badly that I was also very ready to hear, oh, I might be the common denominator here in all these unhealthy relationships. And that doesn't make me a bad person. It just makes me programmed a certain way that's fearful and untrusting. And I have my dukes up and I'm always looking for someone that's out to get me. And I have this confirmation bias that the minute someone looks at me sideways, I'm here to go, there it is. That's it. You're bad. And this is bad. And I'm going to make a big mess and be drama and just make a mess over and over again. And also choosing the same unhealthy relationship and creating the same unhealthy dynamics over and over again. You know, I was in therapy that whole time, but only till I met you. And I don't mean to, like, I'm not like bigging you up because we're doing your podcast.
You.
This is how I talk about you in my everyday life, which is why so many people that I know also see you now because they also see the growth in me and they're like, what are you doing? I want some of that. And I'm like, yeah, you got to talk to Robin. But but it was just so helpful for you. And this is going way beyond you asking me the first time I knew I wanted therapy. I realize I'm really rambling, so I apologize.
You are not rambling.
I'm just so excited to be able to um share the love, I guess. But yeah, the when I really knew I needed to get to work was when you helped me understand that I too have my own red flags that aren't helping me. And I probably should look at myself instead of trying to therapize everybody else
Mm,
and uh, pathologize everyone else.
mm.
Like let's just focus on me and what I'm contributing to these unhealthy dynamics. And so I'll tell you that was the first thing that actually started to change my life.
Yay. Well, I think that when we look at our own patterning, that's like the shift from disempowerment to empowerment, right? Because otherwise it's everybody else's fault. We're a victim, we're
Hmm.
victimized.
Hmm.
So there's something as hard as it is, because that's a hard mirror sometimes to look at. Like, what am I doing? What am I bringing in? Sometimes consciously and unconsciously, right? Like if we're
Hmm. Hmm.
attracting the same unavailable partner, that's not conscious. We're not like, I hope I
Hmm.
can find, the most
Yeah.
unavailable dude in the room. It's just we're drawing
Yeah.
what's familiar. But I agree
And
with
pushing away anything that's not familiar, which unfortunately is healthy and good and available and stable, I
yes.
would see as boring and I'm not attracted to it. So I would disregard it and go for the thing that I know will hurt me because that's dynamic is what's familiar. You go to what's familiar, even if it hurts. I didn't get that.
I didn't get that for a long time either. And I'm so glad. Like, I think every modality of healing and even people that teach it differently is all like relevant and needed. But there is
Yeah.
time for most people where actionable solutions and then like being able to, in an actionable way, develop a healthy relationship with yourself is
Hmm.
needed, and then like me, who's done a lot of the action oriented stuff and continues to, because this is layered work. Like now I love having a therapist that I can call once a week and just talk for an hour because I listen most of the time, and that feels
Mm.
really great. But there was a time in my life where same, it was like I'm going in, I'm just saying the same thing over and over again, and I'm not getting the tools
Yeah.
that I need to be able to shift it.
Right.
So, a big piece of this work is developing a relationship with yourself. So, I will assume that all of the work that you've done and all of the ways that you've looked at yourself has helped your relationship to you and also helped your relationship to others. So, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how that's true for you.
Well, first of all, you introduced me to boundaries. I remember when you were like, well, what are your boundaries? And I was like, what's a boundary? You're like, okay, we have some work to do. Because I was just so deep in my codependence that I just thought you before me at all costs. Everyone, if everyone else is okay and I'm managing everyone else's behaviors and and emotions, and then I'll be able to keep myself safe. And that couldn't have been farther from the truth. And I think helping me understand and know how to implement boundaries taught me so much and taught me how to teach people how to be in my life without us harming each other, and um, taught me how to advocate for myself and taught me how to understand how to not engage in dynamics or behaviors that activate my nervous system and make me feel unwell or safe. So my relationships now are a lot deeper and more authentic and full of truth and transparency and vulnerability and accountability. And there are, of course, ruptures because, like you say, It's relationships are harmony, disharmony, and repair.
Mhm.
And I've had the repair part so much easier and quicker now, and the disharmony isn't as volatile as it once was in my life. um, so it's really helped me have relationships that are full of respect.
Again, how am I not going to cry this whole podcast? So, what you were just mentioning is the good old "if you're okay, I'm okay" thing, right?
hmm
And to
hmm
me, like hearing your stories about what you've gone through, reading the book, the little girl, your little inner child, has always deserved to feel safe. And of
hmm
course, if we're trying to do that cycle of harmony, disharmony, repair with someone who's emotionally immature or unavailable, that repair part doesn't really happen, right? And if we're
Right.
stuck in the relationship and we can't get in, then we just recreate the cycles that harmed us when we were younger. Um,
hmm
so what I love is that, like, when you have a partner who is emotionally mature enough to step into the repair, we create safety for obviously
hmm
the adult part of you, but that little girl in you can finally start to take a deep breath and know that like her
hmm
environment is safe now.
hmm Because she knows I got this.
That's right.
She
Because
doesn't have to come up and fight everybody for me anymore because she knows I'm in control now.
right. So that's a big part of this work particularly is developing an emotionally attuned part of you. So that would be like the parent that you didn't have that can say,
hmm
"Hey, I have boundaries, I have choice, I have discernment, I can keep you safe." So along the topic of boundaries, I know for myself, because every time I teach boundaries, like workshops and that type of thing, I always tell people, like, I'm not an expert because I'm good at this. I'm an expert because
hmm
I'm exceptionally bad at this. And it's been really hard. And because it's
mm
been so hard, I've become really skilled at teaching it because it's been a lot of work to kind of implement it in my life. But one boundary for me that really felt like protection is just that idea of like, is it an authentic yes? Because before I just said yes to everything because I felt like if everybody else was happy, I felt like
Right.
more regulated, but I really wasn't. I was dysregulated all the time. So is there like a specific boundary practice or boundary along the way that felt like protection for you, or one that you go to often?
My first and favorite one, and the one that I share whenever someone comes to me with relationship problems, where I'm like, well, yeah, I don't know about you, but my biggest boundary is I don't do confusion.
Ooh,
That was one of my favorite boundaries you helped me come up with. I remember you being like, it sounds like you might not want to engage with confusing relationships. And I was like, oh, yeah, that sounds great. I can do that. I can go, no, thank you to this confusing thing. I don't know. I'm
yeah.
confused now, so this isn't for me. It was the most exciting and empowering thing to be able to go, this is confusing. Oh, yes, I don't. No, thank you. I don't do confusing. Either we're clear here about where we all stand and how we feel about each other, or we don't. And if we don't, then we're not meant. We don't need to. We don't. Thank you so much. No thanks. And that has, that alone
Hmm.
changed so much in my life.
So I'm so glad you're my first guest because we can go so deep and I can start throwing some things out here in this episode. One of the things that I teach people is that confusion is one of the biggest red flags in relationships.
Mm,
But for so
mm,
many of us, like part of relating or love is confusion. And we don't really
mm.
realize that we have felt so confused our whole life because we developed coping mechanisms to
Yeah,
try to cope with it, but it in itself is enough. And I love that it's just like, oh, I don't do that. Because that's eventually where I want people to get with boundaries. Not this like, you can't do this to me, like super rigid thing, but just like this little
yeah.
Eddie that's like, no, no, like, I don't
Oh,
fuck
no,
with
thank you. Yeah.
Well, thanks, right?
Yeah. It's the best.
Oh, I
It's
love
the
it.
best because it's not making anyone, it doesn't mean anyone's bad. It just means, oh, we're not aligned. It's like, oh, no, thank you. That's how I take care of myself is, oh, that doesn't feel good. I don't like being confused.
And I
And
think
I'm gonna,
when you have grown up for decades feeling confused and feeling powerless in it, you have
yeah.
every right,
Hmm.
to just disengage. So thank you for bringing that part up. And I think it leads me to my next question, which to me, I think self-trust is the core of this work. It's a little bit hard to market because it sounds like such a like cliche, corny type of thing. Like you can trust yourself. And so often we're like, well, I already
Hmm.
trust myself, but it's so much deeper than that. So, I think that it's something a lot of people struggle with, especially if you grew up in environments that had you question your inner knowing or your intuition, which
Hmm.
really is environments that gaslit us, which is where confusion kind of starts from. It's like, even as
Sure.
kids, our nervous system communicates to us. It goes, men shouldn't behave like that. This shouldn't be happening. But our environment goes, no, 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 this is normal. This is fine.
Right.
Right. Or like
Right.
people see their parents fighting or violence and they'll say something like, oh no, no, dad's just stressed out at work. It's okay. And you're like, okay, wait, my nervous system, my knowing is telling me this is
Right.
off, but my environment is telling me it's okay. So I guess the question is, how has self trust played a role in your healing and your growth? Because I've seen a huge increase for you. Yeah.
Well, I didn't trust myself when I met you.
Mm.
I remember being so afraid of making any kind of decision. I remember needing you to help me through every text message. Like, I don't know how to respond to this. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to do. What do you mean I'm abandoning myself? What do you mean it's okay to advocate for myself? I don't trust myself to not fall back into this very unhealthy dynamic again. I'm so scared that I don't know how to do this. I didn't trust myself at all.
Mm.
Uh, and truly, thank God for you because I didn't trust anybody, but I trusted you. And I just was like, this girl's on to something, and I'm just going to give her all my trust. And because I have nothing else, I remember just being on my knees. And maybe this is why you came to me, because I remember just going, God, please, I'll do anything. Just tell me what to do. I surrender. I give up. I'm going to stop controlling. I don't know what to do. Please help me and just guide me and help me get out of this because I want out and I don't know how to do it. And there you are. And
Called me
I
in.
just clung to you like the mother that I needed, or the big sister that I needed, or what the angel that I needed. And you helped me develop that trust in myself by just little baby steps and showing me the power of boundaries and holding my hand through the process of boundaries are scary because at first it feels confrontational. It's scary because it feels it's the antithesis of how a codependent would operate because we a codependent doesn't say no. A codependent doesn't say no, thank you, even or I'm so programmed to abandon myself and to just do what I think would make me lovable. And so yeah, those little small increments of you helping me implement boundaries along the way helped me start to trust myself because after enough collected experiences of those things turning out okay, you build, the data over time. You build trust not only in your surroundings but in yourself. And I thank you for that.
Mm. Well, I love that you mentioned data over time. That's the way that I define trust.
Yeah, all my language is
No,
from you.
no, no, it's not. I probably stole some language from you
So
too.
true.
So I think that the way that I coach, and this is not about blowing me up, like this is truly about, I mean, I personally think that I'm a conduit for something that just helps me, help other people. But the reason why I asked you to be a guest on this show first is because I wanted someone who had a really great experience with this work, that has a book that you can share that so many people can read and relate to. But to come on here and just kind of talk about how the work helped you. So one of those things, I define trust as data over time. And when we started working with each other, I think that's one also unique part of this work is that I didn't read this in a book. I didn't study this in school. I literally have crawled out of my own depths of emotional hell. And a lot of what I teach is what I learned, right? So when you're going through your things, I can say, oh my gosh, Minka, I had the same experience in a past relationship
Mm-hmm.
and I use this. And so it's very relatable. So we're building
Yeah.
trust with each other, right? And
Mm-hmm.
there's one part of your book that stood out to me over all parts, and I don't think I'll ever forget it. And it was a part of the book where your mom was sick with cancer and, declining.
Mm-hmm.
You were going to a therapist at the time, and the therapist gave you advice to tell your mom, well, I think she said your mom doesn't love you,
Mm-hmm.
which was so interesting to me when I read it because I am intuitive. And so I use intuition in the work. And I felt your mom's presence so much in our work. And I knew that she was an emotionally immature parent. And I had a lot
Mm-hmm.
of empathy for her too, but also like some accountability in the things that you didn't get. But your mom just seemed like a beautiful light in the way that I experienced her energy, even though I know that she did a lot of things that impacted you. And so I remember the therapist said something like, your mom doesn't love you, and then encouraged you to write a letter to your mom that said like what a bad mom she was and gave all of the evidence. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I wanted to bring that up today because I believe that we can hand our power over all over the place in our life. We can do it with men in relationships. I've seen people do it with doctors. I've myself done it like, oh, well, they must just know. And so I have
Sure.
to just blindly listen to them. And I myself have done it with therapists as well or mental health professionals. So I thought just if you could share a little bit about your experience with that, because I think
Mm-hmm.
that's advice maybe that you wouldn't have followed now.
No. Yeah, so she I don't know if maybe she felt a little protective of me or something, but I think emotionally sort of might have been reacting to some of my stories about my mom, and she I'm sure had the best intentions, of course, but she just was like, that's not love. That's not a mother's love. A mother doesn't do all XYZ. That is not a mother's love. Um and I think that before she dies, it's important that you let her know all the ways that she hurt you. And I was 25 years old and I didn't know. And I was like, "Oh, this woman, she knows everything and this feels scary to do." Um And, now, of course, I have a stronger sense of self and I can feel my own gut and I can, disagree if even with you, Robin, if I feel like I need to, I can, so now, of course, I'd be like, maybe not kick her while she's down. Like, maybe she just needs love right now and to feel safe and that everything's okay. And I'll do my work later, maybe just love her right now and like relieve her of the guilt and the shame she's already white knuckling dying with. Like, God, if I could take that moment back, that's the one regret I have. And but it happened and it's okay, she's better off. I this physical form was not the best for her spirit, and um, she's in a place of love now, and she knows how I feel, and it's all okay. But I I I do think it's important to remind folks that no one, you know, what does our friend Erin say? Never trust a guru.
God, I love that.
Yeah.
Except she says it in her southern voice, which never trust
Yeah.
you.
I know. It's so
Think about
cute.
it that way. But I think that it's important to share something like that because for myself in the ethical power dynamic that I'm in being a coach, I don't know better than you know, and my job
Mm.
isn't to bring you to my truth. My job is to connect you to your truth. So
Hmm.
every piece
Hmm.
of advice, I call it an invitation.
Yeah.
You should do this, or advice, which is just like, hey, you
Right.
should consider this. And then when I give feedback, I'll always say if it's aligned. And sometimes it's like, you
Yes.
don't have to know in that moment. Think about it if it's aligned or not.
Yeah.
But I remember reading that and just cringing.
Yeah.
That was a time that, like, obviously this person was trying to help you and didn't have any ill intent, but it wasn't aligned and you ended up
Hmm.
with some more guilt. So I think it's just good to know that, like, the right help leads you to your truth and helps
Hmm.
you find the wisdom that's already in you. It's not, I'm not the keeper of the knowledge. I'm sharing the knowledge to activate your truth.
What a great other example of that's what happens when you're outsourcing your um like choices in life. Like what a great example of I didn't have a relationship with myself or my gut or my inner knowing. I thought everyone else knew better, and so what a great example of that wasn't her fault
No.
that I did that moment hurt my mom. It was my fault because
Yeah.
I made that choice. I didn't go, no, thank you. I'm not going to go ahead and hurt her even more right now. I'm trying to find peace and to forgive and to love. I'm not trying to punish her. So that is an example of just how the importance of knowing it. All the answers are within us. It's just sometimes we need someone like you to just guide us along the way and pull it out of us, and the choices are up to us, like you said.
So basically, my job is just to model what your secure, emotionally attuned adult
Mm,
before you have it on board, not to
right.
do all the things that I, think is right. But I think one more piece that's important to note is that we all make mistakes relationally. I think the
Yeah.
most important part is that when you increase your level of consciousness, you just learn from them. So, even though that was
Hmm.
something that you regret, now I think, like, I can hold on to my power. I can love people the way that feels aligned versus the way that's right or wrong.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So I think that's the most important part. It's not about doing it perfectly. I mean, I don't do this work perfectly at all.
I
The
beg to differ.
No, well, I'll tell you I don't. But I'm human. I'm human. I wouldn't be learning if I did it perfectly. I made a
Mm.